My name is Abigail Ciasullo. The name of my show is Reconcile. My work focuses on relationships, and I use noses to symbolize those relationships. While developing the subject for my body of work, I was coming out of a drawing class where I had worked on portraits, and I had loved working on noses specifically, and I was trying to figure out why I have this fixation on noses. What was so interesting about them? I realized that I got this innate connection with the person while working on their nose because it felt so intimate. It's not something you work on and look at really closely in life. And so I decided that would be an interesting subject to focus on. Specifically, I'm working with the end of relationships. I use cardboard, which is a temporary material, to symbolize the volatile nature of relationships. I let weather and time break down the cardboard. I stick it out in the rain and storm and let weather wear it down. I've played around with elements using different seasons. I've splashed paint and water on it myself. So I enjoy playing around with fault and the idea of what causes relationships to end, what can be lost. This process has become even more important than the noses. It's the abstraction through this process that develops that connection with the loss of relationships for me. The wearing down of cardboard creates this beautiful texture for me, and that's what I've gravitated towards the most, I think, with cardboard. The color and the texture that comes from water, it loses structural integrity, so I have to reinforce it and I have to play around with how I'm going to treat these pieces once they've gone through this breaking down. These panels started off my entire body of work. They started as an installation in a smaller gallery where they were about as tall as the walls in the room. It was pretty closed off, and they were closed together, and it had a progression of abstraction which showed my progression artistically, but also as I broke down the cardboard, they increasingly lost their structural integrity, and by the end they were on the floor. I blow up my references to such a large scale because I wanted to focus in on the noses, and they just have a higher impact, and it helps them become less recognizable. I don't want them to be necessarily recognizable to a specific person. It's about the relationship and the connection and the intimacy in general. It's also helped me loosen up and create more of a free and loose and interesting pieces. Personally, I think it's helped my process and my growth as an artist. Originally in the installation, the noses were paired together. They're made up of two panels, and for the installation in the show, I decided to break them up. I felt that it fit better with the show as a whole. These were the most recognizable and the least abstracted overall, and so it felt more cohesive, broken up, and it also made it more interesting just visually. Personally, I enjoyed mixing and matching them. I put them on these easels because the transition from the room and nailing them onto the wall to creating a freestanding space, I organized it in an arc to kind of replicate that room that I originally had in that installation. Working with such large pieces of cardboard has allowed me to experiment with a lot of different materials. I've been working with paint and pastel to create a lot of the lines, as well as charcoal to create more depth. I've also found a lot of nature and natural materials to be helpful. I included rain and snow and wind as materials in my list for my labels. Those have also been integral in my development of my pieces. Several ways that I incorporated nature into my process was with weighing down these pieces of cardboard with rocks. They blow away. I've lost several pieces in the process to wind and storms. So weighing them down with rocks has been an interesting experience. They've created unique shapes and imprints on the cardboard, which I enjoyed, which is why I highlighted them in this piece by coloring them so that they stand out. They just are interesting shapes, and I think that they break up the nose some more. Other materials that I focused on for the latter part of my development of pieces were ice, salt, snow, and spray paint. So this piece specifically has gold spray paint that I used to create some highlights. This part is the bridge of the nose, and I layered paint on top of it, which created some interesting textures and also highlights with the gallery lights hitting it. And then this part is the nostrils. And ice has been really interesting as well. It's created this feathering kind of texture. It has like a crystallization that the paint followed, which I found very captivating. In several of the pieces, there are also leaves. I found some rocks in the back of the pieces before they get ripped up by the rocks. I've had to make the best with pieces. They've turned out differently than I expected them to. Some people would say that this could ruin the artwork. Some of the pieces are completely washed away. The noses are unrecognizable. But that's been part of the exercise of becoming comfortable and adapting.